There's been a lot of volatility in software stocks this year, Kyle, and many have fallen. So I just want to take a step back from the day-to-day volatility and just sort of ask, what is the market debating right now, and why have stocks fallen so much?
Yeah, I think for a very long time, software had a really strong premium to broader IT stocks. And I think a lot of that was quite reasonable. They had recurring revenue, high gross margins, low capital intensity, and for that reason, they traded at really high premiums. We've seen that begun to get questioned this year. New advancements in AI technologies, things most recently like Claude Code, have made people question the durability of those cash flows. There's really two primary issues that the market sees, or two potential sources of risk that the market sees. I bucket them into two broad categories. One is the implications of cheaper code, which is happening from new AI code assistant tools, and the potential implications from new ways of working that could impact these businesses' fundamentals in the future.
So cheaper code, the idea that AI might make software cheaper to make or to build. Who benefits from that?
So I think a few things are going to change. I think one, it potentially leads to more new entrants into the software ecosystem overall. Writing code takes time, it takes resources. Now, if my engineers are more productive, I need fewer of them, and I can write code more quickly. Currently, who we're seeing benefit is the AI model providers themselves. But I think over the longer term, the bar of what is good software is just going to continue to get raised over time. 20 years ago, having good software, the bar was having a simple user interface. In the future, it's going to be new AI agents. So for that reason, I think that the incumbents are going to be able to leverage these tools, make their businesses more efficient, and continue to differentiate themselves versus new entrants.
What about internally built substitutes? Is that something that is in consideration at this moment?
It's a risk that the market certainly thinks about. Not only the software vendors themselves can make code more cheaply, but their customers could potentially make code and software applications more cheaply. This is an area that I don't think will happen, at least to the degree that some people might think it will. One, these are mission-critical enterprises that need focused attention. Organizations have fixed resources, and they're usually best served as using those fixed resources to things that are core to their competitive advantage. And I think the other part that maybe gets lost sometimes is that software is a lot more than just code. You need to support the code, you need to update the code, you need to do security fixes, you need to do patches, you need to have a roadmap to implement new features. These are all things that if somebody were to create internal substitutes, they then take on themselves.
So that's cheaper code, but you mentioned newer ways of working.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that and what that might mean.
Yeah, I think this is probably like the fuzzier of the two, but I think it's one that potentially could have more dramatic implications for software. Historically, software was accessed by humans, right? We went into our Salesforce application or our SAP application. We encoded workflows in code, and we monetized those via software. If more of this work is done by AI agents, computer applications that are not used by humans, do some of those things that traditionally make software important no longer be important? For example, an AI agent doesn't need a graphical user interface. It just accesses the code itself. So there's a potential risk that if these new AI agents sit on top of existing software vendors, the software vendors just turn into what we would call a dumb pipe, is just kind of an analogy to use. And its value proposition is lessened.
And then it sounds like the level of dislocation that you've seen in valuation so far is coming from a very high starting point, and maybe there are some companies that aren't looking terribly cheap. But are you at a point now where you look at the sell-off in the software industry and think that fears have become excessive, or is it more of a case-by-case basis?
I think in broadest senses, it's probably become a little bit excessive. Just in terms of sentiment, I mean, you can't open like the newspaper or turn on CNBC without hearing about the SaaS apocalypse. So I think like from that perspective, it's probably gotten a little bit excessive. Because of that, I've begun to marginally lean into software a little bit more. I do think, though, on a relative basis, software is always judged relative to its peers in broader information technology, and a lot of that is the semiconductor stocks. And what you're seeing right now is the semiconductor stocks are doing quite well, as they are the picks and shovels for this AI build-out. I think over time it's going to move to the software stocks and the application layer, but it does take time.
All right, so let me just ask a broader question to you, Kyle. So there are long-term challenges, as you have described, in the industry, and we don't know how those changes are going to play out. But the stocks have moved a lot in the near term. So what are you doing with both of those things?
I think that there's opportunities in the short term, but there are these big questions that I think are largely unanswerable, and they are potential risks. The gut reaction is like, oh, this stuff is sold off quite a bit. This is a buying opportunity, but you forget that it's coming from a very high level, right? So I think a lot of this stuff is probably just getting closer to fair value-ish estimate, levels here. These foundation model companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and Gemini and whomever are growing really quickly. Where does that fit in with existing software? Does it begin to eat into existing software? Does that capture all the value? Like, is that the big profit pool? Does it go to Amazon? Is that the AWS? Is that the big profit pool? You look at the leaderboards for some of these foundation models, and they leapfrog every single week. OpenAI comes out with a new model, and that leapfrogs an Anthropic model, and a new Gemini model comes out, and that leapfrogs OpenAI. And what that tells me is that these companies have very little differentiation and subsequently have very little pricing power. We see the margins that OpenAI and Anthropic are getting, and they're quite de minimis. What that tells me is the people that are really going to benefit from the diffusion of AI models are going to be this software layer. It's going to be ServiceNow, who's able to bundle this product in a unique way and sell it to their customers at a very high margin. I think over time, this layer, commodity is kind of a loaded word, but I think over time, that foundation model layer probably gets commoditized in some fashion.
So let me just ask, though, about these foundational layers. Are the differences between them incremental? Mm-hmm. It sounded like you were saying that they were, mm-hmm. but when Claude Code came out, it seemed to really spook people about software.
The different thing about Claude Code is for the first time, we've taken an AI model and we actually put it locally on your machine and gave it access to your terminal. Mm-hmm. So what that allowed Claude Code to do for the first time was take a multitude of actions in an agentic fashion directly on your endpoint, on your laptop or on a server. So things that we've been talking about, like AI agents and automating tasks, got a real shot in the arm from this new Claude Code model.
If you think about sort of best of breed solutions, yep. where you've got a firm kind of offering different yep. solutions or kind of more modular software, mm-hmm. does it argue that incumbents might be moving more towards best of breed, or how are you thinking about that kind of migration?
Yeah, I think it actually goes the other way. I think that it moves more towards platforms and bundling versus unbundling. And I think the reason for that is the really key ingredient to these new AI products is data. And who has the data? It's Salesforce, it's SAP, it's ServiceNow, it's Microsoft. These new vendors like OpenAI or Anthropic or Sierra or whomever don't have the data unless Salesforce or SAP or ServiceNow gives it to them. So I think actually this data moat, this data gravity that they have actually leads to a rebundling of software. The competitive advantage for these software firms has not been best code, it has not been the best engineers, it has not been the swankiest new product for a very, very long time. You look at the largest software vendors in the world like Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, they were founded 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it begs the question then, what is actually the moat of these businesses? I think a lot of times it's existing switching costs, it's distribution advantages, it's deep embedded workflows within organizations that make them extremely hard to rip and replace. The competitive advantage of these businesses is necessarily destroyed just because code gets cheaper to write. I'd also say that code getting cheaper and software getting easier to write has been the trend of software for forever. We moved from mainframe to personal computer to open source software to Kubernetes to the cloud, and the latest thing is now these AI code writing tools. This has been a continuum of software for 20, 30, 40 years. It is an accelerant of that trend, but it is the same trend that's been going on in software, and these models have done quite well throughout that transition.